Hey all, my name's Angelica Rubio, State Representative for District 35, representing the City of Las Cruces, and this is a brief update. It is about 9 o'clock on Tuesday, August 11th. I just drove back earlier from Socorro, where myself, Representative Micaela Lara Cadena, and I presented at the Science and Tech interim committee in Socorro at New Mexico Tech, and it was really interesting. So as I have mentioned, we are working on a moratorium for the upcoming session, and it's August, and so the session doesn't start until January. And what we have are some concepts around this moratorium. And I think that there were a couple legislators today who already wanted to see a bill, and that's not how we operate in terms of me and Representative Lara Cadena and Representative Chavez. We're spending the next couple months doing some town halls, hopefully in your community, and virtual town halls as well, because we want to gather as much information as possible. I think the reason that I really wanted to come on here though tonight is because I really kind of wanted to share my own experience serving in the legislature, and as it pertains to these issues around Project Jupiter. For those of you who don't know, I have been in the legislature for 10 years. And in those 10 years, my role, I think, as a legislator has been to figure out how do we transition away from oil and gas. I've mentioned time and time again, I was born and raised in the Permian Basin. My family, the majority of my family still works there, lives there. They directly or indirectly receive their livelihoods from the oil and gas industry. And so for me, my priority has always been, and also because 50% of our budget here in New Mexico, almost 50%, is from oil and gas revenues. My, I guess, mission in serving in the legislature has always been to try to figure out how we transition away from this industry, and not just oil and gas, but every other kind of extractive industry, because I don't believe that it serves us to continue on this pathway. These industries, they take from us and then they leave the state, and then we're stuck having to pay the costs time and time again. And so that's something that I've been working on since I started in the legislature, is like, how are we thinking about other types of jobs, work here in the state that isn't just about extracting our natural resources and taking from our communities, but really thinking in terms of the pillars of a restorative economy, and how we're thinking in terms of like regenerative types of ideas, and not just the taking of our people and our land. And so over the course of the last decade, what I have heard, what I have seen and been a part of, are these conversations and about these jobs. And I was kind of a little taken aback today, because what I kept hearing from legislators was that we need guardrails for data center. And what that means is we need community agreements when it comes to making sure that the community is brought forth on these conversations and decisions around this industry that we're talking about in terms of data centers. That we need labor agreements to ensure that our brothers and sisters in labor unions are getting these jobs, are being prioritized on these jobs. And it's just really, I think it's just, I'm happy that these conversations are happening, and that legislators are now interested in guardrails. But I think the frustrating part about all of this is that for the last decade, I have been demanding these guardrails. Many of the organizations that I have worked with on issues related to climate justice, on workers' justice, we have been making demands on these community agreements, on these labor agreements. In 2021, when we passed paid sick leave, that was a negotiation that was very hard to do because workers weren't being prioritized in those spaces. There was a bill that I worked on to create the Sustainable Economy Task Force under the Department of Economic Development. That task force was tasked to identify industries coming into the state and ensure that it was in alignment with the values of New Mexico, and to ensure that not only did it meet the environmental requirements that we felt were important in this task force, but also when it came to workers, ensuring that these were sustainable jobs. That Sustainable Economy Task Force, it stopped a couple years ago. Like, it wasn't taken seriously by this administration. A few years ago, there was a bill around advanced tech where a lot of our folks in our coalitions, as challenging as it was to get involved in that debate around advanced tech because of this legacy around industry in the past, came to the table and demanded guardrails around these conversations around advanced tech. And we were seen as, it was seen as a non-negotiable. And I want to share all of that because, as frustrating as these conversations are to me, where I feel like so many of us have been like shouting through the roofs for a long ass time about the importance of why we need to center community, why we need to ensure community has public input in these decisions, why labor should be prioritized, why when it comes to issues around our environment, our climate, we should have a say in that. We have been making these demands for years. And today, in presenting our bill around the moratorium, the concepts that we're coming to, we had legislators in the room not supporting a moratorium and instead creating a legislation on guardrails. We are still going to push a moratorium. That is my priority heading into January. Obviously, it will not make a difference with Project Jupiter because it is not retroactive. But Project Jupiter is by far the worst example that we should be using to how we do not do things when it comes to bringing industry into this state. And yes, there will be conversations around guardrails, whether it has to do with environmental guardrails or guardrails around community agreements and labor agreements. But I just want to be as transparent and forthright with you all that there are just legislators in our state who we could have been in such a different place right now had we passed a lot of those guardrails a few years ago, and we just didn't. I don't say that to be discouraging. I say that just because I need you all to just stay the course. The next few months, as we head into session, we're going to need you all and your voice to continue on when it comes to this, not only this issue around Project Jupiter, but all of the legislation that is going to be considered heading into January in 2027. Everyone, particularly in our Democratic caucus, are not in alignment, and that is an important piece of information that you need to have. We need to hold our own just as much as and accountable as the Republicans. So with that, talk soon.